Welcome to another Ministry Pivot, Reverend Russ. So excited to have you here. I wanted to just thank everyone who was able to be a part of our New Year Pivot series with Dr. Nicole Martin, with Bishop Thomas, and with Pastor Matthew Watley. Again, shout out to Givelify for partnering with us. But thank you all for being on that and being a part of that New Year pivot. Hopefully it was helpful. If you haven't heard of it, just go back into the episodes. It's live now, so you can go back into the episode. The show notes are coming soon. There was a lot of information. It was over 2 hours, almost over 2 hours of conversation, and that conversation led to a bunch of rich information and input. And so we're working through those show notes. So that will happen. Then I wanted to also say that I know today we're going to talk with my good friend, Pastor Christopher Harris, talking about staffing. But before we go on Pastor Christopher Harris, I wanted you to know that we are starting a new Ministry Pivot series called Ministry Pivot Calling. And we're going to be talking with some thought leaders, some friends of mine who are in great positions in the world, great positions out there, and but who are Christian, who know what God is and who God is, rather, and they are going to be sharing with us. And so it's going to be a little bit different. The first one up is a very close friend of mine, Samantha Silawani, aka Baby Sam, aka Sam the Hype Beast. And so she is an awesome leader over at RCA Records, and she'll talk more about that. But we're going to talk about her faith journey, talk about how her job is her ministry, talk about how God is impacting her where she is. And we have several thought leaders. We have Aaron Spears coming. We have Terrell Daniels coming. We have a lot of thought leaders, and I'm super excited about those. But now I want you to get ready for a conversation that we're talking about staffing, again, with Pastor Christopher Harris. And you'll hear more about who he is and what he's done as we look at staffing in this new year. Come on now, let's talk to Pastor Christopher. Welcome to another episode of Ministry Pivot. I'm Reverend Russ. Super excited to have you with us again on today. It's a new year. We're super excited for all that God did in 2020, even though it was very interesting, very nuanced for all of us. I'm excited about what God is doing in 2021. I have a great friend, a great guest today with me. Pastor Christopher Harris is with us, and I'm super excited to have Pastor Christopher with us. Pastor Christopher and I actually go back years online. We knew through digital, and now everything's digital. But Pastor Christopher is an awesome leader, awesome pastor, awesome entrepreneur, awesome author. He has done a plethora of work in ministry and also in business and also in education. Pastor Christopher currently serves with Crossover Church, and he is there as the executive pastor there. He has served at Fellowship Church in Chicago. He's also served and is serving, I believe, still. He'll lay out more of this with the Full Gospel Fellowship. Pastor Christopher has a ton of information, a ton of knowledge, ministry experience. Today, we're going to talk about staffing. He also is lead of a staffing organization, which we'll talk some about in our conversation today. But I'm not going to say a little bit more about what Pastor Christopher is going to about who he is, because he's here. And so, Pastor Christopher, if you can just give us a little bit about your background, man, and I'm glad to have you with us today on Ministry Pivot.
Man, Pastor Russ, what's going on, man? First of all, thank you for having me on. As you mentioned earlier, man, you and I go back a few years, and I just got to say publicly that, man, back a few years ago, you were shaming all of us because you were pushing out like 20 books a year and made the rest of us look lazy. Then here's a brother that's starting his own publishing firm for ministry books and Christian books. You worked with actually a family member of mine, Lisa, and you were helping Lisa get her books together. And I'm like, man, this guy is killing it. I got to get on my game. Man. So praise I just want to say kudos to you, man. Appreciate your influence and appreciate what God is doing through you and in you and how he's leveraging that. So yeah, man. I've been very, very fortunate, very blessed over the last few years to be able to do some things that I really love doing. As you mentioned, I'm an executive pastor at Crossover Church. We're in Tampa, Florida. We're a healthy, multi-ethnic, multi-class, multi-generational church. My lead pastor is Pastor Tommy Colonen, and he's a pioneer in the Christian hip hop movement. And so, man, we are very, very fortunate to be able to work together and be able to do ministry the way that we do it. And, of course, I literally every single day get to help do system structures and strategies and help to build the kingdom of God in that way. We have a network as a part of our church. It's called the Flavor Fest Network. So I get the opportunity to network with pastors on a regular basis, which allows me to put my other hat on as a church consultant. I've been able to do that for the last few years or so, just really helping churches navigate those incredible conversations. And as you mentioned, I've been a part of Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship since 2003. For a little over a decade, I served as the general overseer. That's a term that we use in the fellowship. But I oversaw internationally our children and youth ministries and all the children and youth pastors that go along with that. And then I've since transitioned out of that role. Was able to name my successor and get him acclimated. He's doing an incredible job. And now I'm really helping the fellowship to navigate vision implementation and strategy, being able to work directly with our headquarters and with our presiding bishop, Bishop Joseph Walker. And so that's really a blessing. So as you can tell, like I'm fortunate because, man, I've got my feet in worlds that normally don't crisscross. Exactly. And I don't take that for granted, man. As a matter of fact, it's, I have a list of things that I thank God for daily. And that's one of the things that I thank God for daily, that I have not been boxed in by affiliation or denomination, that God's really been able to give me grace to do that. And then, of course, last year, Martin Luther King weekend, I was able to officially pull the trigger and launch a platform called diversechurchjobs.com, which helps people of color in ministry find incredible ministry opportunities. And we can probably talk a little bit more about that later.
No, that's great. That's great. That's great. And I told y'all, so he has a bunch of hats. I don't know if you heard, but I heard like 8 hats just now.
No, man.
He's wearing, and that is awesome.
But I didn't talk about my podcast, and I didn't talk about my books. My books. You're the reason I got books.
Well, that's what's up, man. All of us. That's what's up, man. I'm excited about it, man. I'm excited about it. But so what I wanted to do was I wanted us to couch the conversation around we're in a new year. We're moving forward. God has been kind. We know about COVID. Obviously, we know about the vaccine, but we also know that church is different. And we know that churches have to pivot. And one of the areas that churches have to pivot in, is when it comes to who's on their team and staffing. And so my first kind of question to you, Pastor Christopher, I want you to kind of help us kind of think through that is what does the church staff look like after COVID or in COVID? Because we're not after COVID just yet. I don't even know when we're going to be able to say after COVID, because I know people who have they're calling them long haulers, who they've had it and now they've been away from having COVID, but they're still dealing with issues. And so I'm not sure when it's going to be over, but what does staffing look like now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And so first of all, I think, many people that's outside of the church space may not know that when you serve on a church staff, in many cases, you're generally not just wearing one hat. In many cases, you're wearing multiple hats at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And contrary to popular belief, the average church is not a mega church. The average church doesn't have, a staff of 20, 30, 40, 50 people. The average church size probably lends itself to an average staff of probably 10 or less, right? Yeah. And those 10 people are doing the job of 30 or 40, and then some. I think the pivot, the distinction now in a COVID era is that staffs, pastors, leaders are having to be what I would call presentation ambidextrous, right? And to be ambidextrous means that you can use both hands, right?
I get you.
Fluidly. Yeah. So on one hand, you got your audience where pre-pandemic you were serving, they were primarily brick and mortar. The goal was to get people to the building. The goal was to offer services in the building. The goal was to get people on your campus. The goal was to get people aware of what you were doing in your building, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now that's shifted. And while we are not forsaking the brick and mortar crowd, we have to also very intentionally and strategically think about our online audience, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying online audience. At our church, we've worked real hard at saying our online worshipers, right? Because they're not just an audience. This is real life, right? These folks are literally worshiping digitally online.
Yeah.
And so all of us can acknowledge then that part of what that means then is that we've had to recalibrate how we create margin in our lives, because now ministry literally is 24 hours a day, literally.
Yes.
Right. So now we can no longer just say, I can't check my inbox, right, on social media. We're now, getting phone calls on a regular basis. We got to return to voicemails, right? We got to pay attention to the emails that are coming in. You got to pay attention to social media. And in a real sense, we're having to figure out what our capacity is to do ministry every single day, whether that's through video, whether that's through posting, creating content, the whole 9 yards. And so what that looks like from a staffing standpoint, number one, every church has got to make sure that your people by themselves are healthy, right? Yeah. Are your people healthy? Are they healthy emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally, et cetera, et cetera? Because if you're not healthy, this expanded capacity is going to crush you, right?
Yes.
It's going to crush you. My brothers and sisters, 3 John 2, I pray above all things that would prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. So our souls have to be healthy, our minds have to be healthy, our bodies have to be healthy. And so pastors are going to have to be intentional. Of course, many of us know about the emotionally healthy spirituality. That's a foundational level at this point now to make sure that your people are healthy. The celebration of discipline, another book that is powerful to make sure that your life and your rhythms are good. And as leaders and churches pivot to do those things, then here's what's even more important now. And you and I both know this from a ministry perspective. It can no longer, from a long-term standpoint, be, well, I just need you to do this because it needs to be done. Now we're going to have to figure out how to get people into their sweet spot so that it can be done in a sustained way. Because if I'm doing something that I'm not good at, I can't sustain that too long.
Yeah. No, and let me add to that point, and not even in addition to doing something that I'm not good at, I can't do it too long. But if you get people in their sweet spot, as you call it, Pastor Christopher, then you get people to do stuff that you wouldn't even be thinking about.
That's exactly right.
That's what I'm seeing a lot in this season. Thank God for my pastor. Shout out Pastor Watley at Kingdom. We have made major pivots in several areas, and one of the areas is staffing. And so we have staffers now who are put in new places, and they're doing things that we just didn't think about. I personally didn't think about, and it's awesome because they're in their spot. And I think that's the thing. I think it comes to the parable of the talents, right? Like, I give this to you, but you gave me back a return. You didn't just give me what I gave you. You gave it back with a return. And I think that's a key piece. That I think that's awesome.
Yeah, because the other thing too is this, right? Number one, when you operate in your sweet spot, and at our church, we call your sweet spot your shape profile, right? So your spiritual gifts, your heart's passions, your attitude, disposition, your personality, and then your unique experiences. God wants to take all 5 of those things and make them unique to who you are. And so when you look at that in context, right? In the past, one of the things that has taken place is when a person doesn't do what we ask them to do only, then we simply try to fire them, when we actually never actually stop to consider what are they actually good at.
Yeah, right? No, that's good. That's good. Yeah. That's good, Pastor Chris. Let me ask you this question with that. We talked a little bit before we went live, but in that, let me ask you this question. Is there a such thing as a bad staff person? Do we have bad staff? Is that a thing?
That's such a loaded question.
I know.
So let me just be honest and say I'm nervous because I don't want anybody to take a soundbite of what I'm getting ready to say. Post it in their staff meeting and say, "See, this is why I'm getting ready to fire y'all."
No, that's not what we're saying. That's not it.
No, but it's a good question. We're laughing a little bit, but it's a good question. Let me answer the question this way. First of all, let me say that I think that is really important to clarify expectations in the hiring process.
That's great.
What is this person called to do? What am I expecting of them to do? What are the metrics? What's the wins, right? In the first year, here's how I want to see you win, right? But I think more importantly, it may be healthy to not have expectations at all for the first 90 days to 120 days, because you all are getting in the rhythm of learning each other.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Now,
okay.
here's an example. Here's an example. If Bob gets hired at a church, and let's just say that the pastor is well known. Let's just say that the pastor has a public persona, that, you know, he has a social media following, he's creating content, he got books. So let's just say he does music or just whatever, right? But he has a public persona. So Bob is applying to this church. And a part of what he's looking at also is, wow, man, he's looking at it's almost like he's starstruck a little bit, right? And I'm careful about using that, but you can track along with me. When he gets hired on this job, he may walk in with expectations that now I get access to this celebrity or to this well-known person. And I now I get a behind the scenes. I'll be able to sit down with this person on a weekly basis for a couple hours. This person's going to be a sage, give me wisdom, show me how to do it, you know, all of that. When in fact, you may get hired and this person that you had a public persona of is flying high, they're flying fast, they're moving quickly. They're talking to you on the way on a plane. They're talking to you while they're at a conference. They're talking to you now while they're recording podcasts or virtual sessions. And so you look up and you say, wait a minute. I'm not getting access to this person like I thought, right? This person expecting you to produce, like you are hired to produce. So I think it's important to get into a rhythm of learning each other and clarifying those expectations. But here's, I think, the second thing that's really critical. And this is not, many people would try to put this on a particular generation, but I think it's multi-generational. And that is the staff person teachable? If they are teachable, does your church and your cadence and the culture of your church position them to win as they are learning? Because if you're already at a place where you need people to produce and they should already know and they need to get mentored from somewhere else, then it may not be the season for them. So timing is critical. The culture of the church is critical. And that to me are the more important realities to look at than just trying to determine, is this a bad staff person?
That's good. That's good. And I was, the question came, and we spoke a little bit about this because I took a executive leadership course at Georgetown a couple years back, and one of the things in an HR cohort, in the HR section of the cohort, it was talking about how the ownership of HR is on the organization. That there, in essence, is not really a bad staff person, but it's us being able to utilize. Now, let me just say, and I don't want the soundbite to be taken the other way, right? Pastor Russ said, Reverend Russ said, there's no bad staff person. You work with everybody. Some people you work with, but some people, at the end of the day, right, we're all accountable to God, right? So at the end of the day, while I've been blessed to serve at a church, and I thank God for that, at the end of the day, I ultimately serve God, right? Ultimately, I want to make God happy with my service. It's just in the vehicle of me being at Kingdom Fellowship, or the vehicle of me being wherever I am. But at the end of the day, that's so because there are some people who will just, and we know this, I worked, no offense to anybody who works for the government, but I work for the government, and it's a different animal. You kind of just you clock in and that's it. Like all you gotta do is clock in. In some regards, not all government organizations. Let me just say that because I don't want to take that snippet either and use that somewhere else. But the point is that staffing and HR is really on the organization to use the gifts of the human resource that we have and try to point them in the right way. And so to Pastor Chris's point, there needs to be a plan. There needs to be some level of metric, some level of goal, because that's going to help the overall organization. You letting someone go is not helping the overall, unless they just cannot cut it. They cannot do it. And there are those people out there, and they know who they are, unfortunately. They just want to do their part. And if you're that person listening to me, I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to condemn you. What I'm saying is, like, you need to, we're not supposed to wake up to go to work, to get a check. We have a purpose. We have a calling. You should be in a space where your calling is activated when you work, where your calling is activated. You're excited and you see growth. That's what Pastor Christopher and I are talking about, that churches and organizations need to have those people that they push, because at the end of the day, if we don't have any bad staffers, then it's just us having bad programs for them late. But at the end of the day, it's gonna add up to a bad organization, and that's not going to be helpful for anybody. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Pastor Russ, let me just mention, I have seen individuals who were hired by our church, did
Mhm.
not do well at that particular church, either left, fired, what have you, transitioned out of that place and go to an entirely different space and thrive in that other space.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't mean that the first place was a bad place. There could have been a mixed match, right?
Yes. That's
And so
good.
what's important is, which is part of one of the things that we do with diversechurchjobs.com, is we're not in the business of just trying to make a quick hire, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the numbers already prove the economic impact of a bad hire. So we are already
Yeah.
clear of that. The goal is to make sure that there's a match in cadence and culture and credibility, that there's a match in the vision, there's a match in, because essentially when you are hiring a person at your church,
Yeah.
the image that I use often is that your church is already on the interstate going 85. You now have a person coming on the on ramp and they're merging into this speed.
Yeah.
If you don't do that the right way, there's going to be some accidents. And
That's
so it's
good.
important for us to think through those matches and making sure that there's a synergy that's happening, and not just, I just need to fill a slot, which we know the church world is notorious for saying, I just need to fill a slot. So
Exactly. Let me ask you this question that leads into this. We don't have many more of these, but let me ask you this question. The is it I had this thought, right? To hire or not to hire, right? So with that last thought, right? Bad staff, good staff, knowing that it helps the organization in this season where we are, post COVID, kind of in between, moving through. We don't know what's going to happen necessarily when some churches are open in some places, some churches are not open. What does that look like? And depending on when the person watches this, things may have shifted altogether. But what are some keys, really, is what this means for churches to understand when it's time to hire, or when it's time to really just look at who you may have in your volunteer servant base and kind of train them up.
yeah, so I think and obviously, I mean, there's so many thousands of variables that go into this, right? But
Yeah.
number one, and this is in no particular order, so I'm saying number one, but first I would say, again, what is the personality of the people at your church, right? There are some pastors that are great preachers.
Mm-hmm.
They're not great bosses, right?
That's good.
They're not great leaders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the season dictates what style and what cadence is needed. So what's the season in the life of your church, right? I've been very fortunate, Pastor Russell, if I'm very honest. I've been very fortunate, and I don't know who all may see this, but there are people that are all over the country that know churches that I've served at, know pastors that I've served under, know places that I've served under, and when they hear this, they will bear this to be the truth. The season that I was at a church, God called me there for that season, right? And so it's important for people to know what season of life you're personally in, what you're bringing to the table, what you are not good at, right? Because everything that you say yes to, you're also saying no to something else. And you got to be clear about that, right? You got to be clear about that. And some churches that I was called there to learn certain things and not necessarily produce certain things.
Yeah.
There were certain churches that I was called to where I was called to produce and not necessarily learn, in the sense that to be the student. Like, I mean, we're always learning, but there was much more of a premium on, you're here now to produce, right? There were some places that I was brought in that the goal for me, or spiritually speaking, was to maintain where we were so that things could be stabilized. Because even when things are growing, People may be growing. There are certain seasons where God may have your church just in a season where let's just kind of keep things going right now so that we can firm up our systems and firm up our infrastructure, just whatever else. So all of that, I'm getting to your point of the question that it's critically important to see where you are practically, where you are spiritually, right? The leaders, the staff. Where is the staff culture right now? Because if you start adding people to your staff, but your staff culture is toxic or it's cancerous, right? Now you're bringing in new cells to a cancerous body. And that's a problem, right? So you really need to make sure those things are in place. You would be surprised, Pastor Russell, how many pastors I've spoken with who look to hire and bring new staff members on, and they literally don't have the financial capacity to do it. Like literally, like when you look at their budget, they literally have not properly budgeted for the position of what they're asking this person to do. You know, it's almost like if you were to, you know, I'm trying to think of a role that many of us would understand. So it's almost like if you were to hire an accountant, and the going rate for an accountant with a master's degree, with a CPA, with 10 years of experience is, I don't know, $85,000, right? Hypothetically. I don't know if that's the number or not. I'd have to go look. But if that was the number, you say, well, I'm going to bring in that person. I'm only going to pay them 25 or 30 because this is ministry. This is ministry idea is not going to work because you're going to find somebody at that rate that they have an AA with no experience, and they don't even really know what QuickBooks is yet.
That's not going to be good. Yeah, it's not going to be good.
You're going to get the results from that. And so I think, you know, I think what's also important when we talk about capacity, we're also talking about the financial capacity, right? And then lastly, have you made space for this person based on what you're saying that this person needs to do? So if a person is coming in and the goal is for them to build infrastructure, that means that they're going to be some growing pains. That means that they're going to be some transition in leaders. That means that they're going to be some moving around of leaders. Maybe some ministries will get you know, what I call file 13 or you know, closed out, right? Have you made space for this person? Because this person is going to, now you're asking this person to operate with a certain level of authority, and they need relational capital and, you know, all the things. So all of that goes into place into the conversation around hiring or not hiring.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. That's good. I got two more that's tied to that. One is about teams, and then the other is about resources. And then we're going to talk through resources. But so at our church, we're our pastor, again, shout out Pastor Watley. We are very focused on empowering the people to serve. Obviously, we all do that. We're team building. We're working to get that. Everybody can do better in that. But the question is, what about teams when it comes to your current staffing, right? And then even when it comes to your volunteer base, how can pastors or leaders better utilize their teams?
So most churches start off with certain roles as a volunteer, right? People that are volunteering within the church that can do it. And eventually what happens oftentimes is that the work gets so much that then you have to bring a professional in, or you have to bring in somebody that, you know, can handle this now full time or even part time. So you start oftentimes with a volunteer, then you move to part time, then you move to full time. I think you really, again, it's about the match, right? Because again, if I'm getting a volunteer to do a job and that's not really their sweet spot, they're actually going to be creating more work for the team.
Okay.
And so
that makes sense.
Here's a hard thing that we in church ministry have to process. How long do we go with keeping the position vacant until the Lord sends someone?
Say that again. Say it again, because they didn't hear it. They didn't hear it.
No, they heard it. They heard it. No, they heard it. It was a salah. They heard it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How long do we have to go with a position vacant before we put someone in there? And it's a constant tug of war, right? This is the part that is the rocket science. This is the part that is the mental Olympics that requires ministry to be sometimes a little bit harder than people realize beyond just Sunday, because the work of that position still has to get done. And I've got to almost limp along until the Lord sends somebody that actually is called to that role, that is passionate about that role, that has the credentials to do that role, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just talking about the volunteer part of it. And then I even got to make sure that I'm clarifying the expectations of this volunteer, that I'm asking you to volunteer and not get paid to do this. Right?
Exactly. That's good.
Because here's the challenge that some churches have. The challenge that some churches have is that what we produce and get out on Sundays is such high quality that there becomes a mystique that the church actually has more money than it has, or that the church has more resources than it has, or that somebody is going to come in from the outside and they are going to leverage access for their personal gain. And so churches and leaders are having to think through all of those dynamics, right? At our church, for example, we have a no solicitation policy, and you'll be surprised at how much that has weeded out certain people from even serving in the church, because they want to come in and serve. But the only reason I'm serving is because I sell insurance and I want to be able to have access to these other, right? So all of that goes into all of these conversations.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. That's good. So I'm around it here because I wanted to talk about resources and tools. And I think in this area, one of the key resources and tools is literally what you do, right? It's diverse jobs, diversechurchjobs.com. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about that and kind of how churches may be able to plug in with you, but just some things for them to think about as they are looking at staffing, and anything else that we did not kind of cover in staffing that you wanted to kind of talk through. Let's hit that here too.
Yeah. So here's the first thing that I want to say. First of all, again, thank you for the opportunity to share the platform. If I have a quick moment, I want to. It's easy for me to tell people what we do, right? People can actually go to our website and see what we do. I think it's important for me to just tell people for a quick moment why we do what we do, right? And so, quite candidly, there are, prior to us, limited opportunities for people of color in ministry to find quality ministry jobs outside of being connected to a seminary or a denomination. And even within that, right, if you're a part of a denomination, many people now, I mean, you and I are in two different denominations, but we're friends, right? Yes. Many people now are not just boxed in by their denomination. They may be affiliated with it, but they're not boxed in by it. So even with looking at jobs through your denomination, for some people becomes a limiting reality. And then the other truth of the matter is that most people in ministry actually haven't been to seminary, right? They do extended learning, or they do certificate programs. They have degrees and expertise in other areas, and those skill sets and that expertise is transferable into ministry. And then they have the call of God. So yeah, seminary is important, but it's not the end all be all. So if a person is not connected to either one of those pipelines, then as a person of color in particular, where do they go? Right now, there's two other opportunities then for them. Number one, and this is, of course, outside of their own personal network. So if a person doesn't have an expansive personal network or access to a personal network, there's two other options. The first option is that they can go to these, what I call aggregator websites for ministry jobs. I liken it to like a monster.com or a careerbuilder.com, right? Mm-hmm. These sites actually, they themselves don't produce job postings. They simply bring them in from other places and post them on their website. So they're an aggregator of data. They're pulling it in from lots of different places. And then their business model is set up that people will then pay them to make their particular postings higher on the list to be seen first. Okay. The other opportunity then is staff searching firms. And those have taken off over the last few years. There's a bunch that are out there. There's really about 3 or 4 that have a huge chunk of the market share, if I'm using a business term. When you go to those particular firms, they all will acknowledge that the bulk of their work is the white church. Mm-hmm. So if you're a person of color coming into those platforms looking for ministry jobs, you may find 1 or 2 churches here or there that are churches of color that are trying to navigate with them. But by and large, it's like looking for a needle within a haystack. The other reality is that many churches of color simply cannot afford engaging with those platforms because their price point is so high. So we are coming in right there to meet the need. And here's the most important part, Pastor Russell. I get it. I grew up in the Black church context. I grew up serving in churches of color, right? I've worked with multiple denominations in the African American context. I have served in the multi-ethnic space. I get what it looks like to live in both of those spaces, which back to my introduction when you introduced me earlier, right?
Yeah.
I have been the only Black guy on an all-white staff, right? So the token hire, if you would. So across that spectrum, there's things that I already understand that don't have to be explained to me. And that within itself helps us to navigate our unique niche in that as diversechurchjobs.com, as a mission, as a platform, as a focus, our goal is to help those candidates of color, and I'm defining candidates of color, African American, Hispanic, and Asian, to find those incredible opportunities where they are welcomed. Now, when I say where they're welcome, that also means that we are working with the church. We create a profile for them to make sure that they are ready to hire candidates of color. Right now, obviously, if they're a church of color already, then that may not be a unique nuance. But if they're bringing in a diverse candidate, then we want those churches to also be ready to win. We want those candidates to be winning, to be set up. So in terms of how we do what we do, all of our services, for the most part, are free to the candidate. There are some a la carte add-on services that we help folks build their resumes and other, career development things. But for the most part, to engage with our service, a candidate can come and they will get a complete profile done with us, and that's all for free. When churches engage with us, they will create an agreement with us to help underwrite the cost of the searches that we're doing for that church. And as they engage with us, we walk them through the process of what this looks like, what the salary should be like, what the job descriptions are going to be. We make sure that there's that match there, right? That there's a synergy there. And then we're looking into our database, clearly seeing where there's alignment there. And more than anything, we are prepared to say to a church, right now, we don't have anybody in our pipeline that fits what you're trying to do, but stay with us because there's somebody that's coming. Right. Or we're prepared to say to a candidate, hey, we've got searches that are going on, but we don't think that these fit you right now, but stay with us because there'll be an opportunity that comes at the right time in the right way. Those are the kinds of tools that we're providing. Last thing that I'll say is we work really hard to make sure, because in many cases, churches, search firms, platforms make a very faulty assumption. And the faulty assumption is that candidates already know how to present themselves in a healthy way. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that pre-ministry, I also served in higher education. And one of the things that I had under my purview was career services in the Career Center. So I was able to sort of whet my beak and sharpen my skill set to understand how to help develop people as they are working to do their career searches and their career development. So we really help to work through those candidates being presented in the right and a healthy way to navigate that entire process.
No, that's great. So I said that was it, but I had one question when you said that. This is the last question, and we'll end on it. Have you seen, because we're in a digital world right now, way more digital than we were before COVID? Have you seen churches making a pivot where they're in, let's say for us, we're in Maryland, right, DC area, but hiring someone to like be on staff who lives in Florida, but because of everything being digital now, that's something that is more on the plate than it was before. Are you seeing that? Is that something that your churches should look at doing, or what?
Yes. So to answer your question succinctly, yes.
Okay.
All the limitations are off.
Okay.
All the traditional limitations are off. People are working virtually now. People are working, they're serving in one state and able to Skype in, Zoom in, Cisco, WebEx, whatever, into staff meetings on a weekly basis. They are on staff, but they, literally, I have friends of mine who are engaging with graphic design companies that are literally in other countries. And you would think that this person lives, has an office right next door to them because they're turning things around and they're producing. So more than anything, I think it's about clarity of the vision. And then are we open to doing things in a non-traditional context? Remember, the message doesn't change, right? The methods get adjusted. And I think if pastors and churches are willing to pivot with the method and the methodology, marry the message, date the method.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Pastor Christopher, man, I appreciate you joining me today, man, and being a part of Ministry Pivot today. We're going to wrap out this session. But again, if you are on here, you can make sure to follow us on Ministry Pivot. Make sure to subscribe to the videos. There is a show note at the bottom of where this video is, or a link to the show notes and all of what, not everything, because Pastor Christopher said a whole lot. So a lot of what he said will be in the show notes, but also a link to his organization so that you can get more contact from them, but then also just so you can have information. Excited again for you to be a part of this Ministry Pivot. Looking forward. I have some good ones planned up coming up in the next couple weeks as well. Looking forward to you being a part of the next Ministry Pivot. Until we talk and I see you the next time, have a great day. Be blessed. And remember, this is the season of opportunity. You just have to pivot toward it. God bless.